hmTv matters.
Hello and welcome back to History Repeats. I'm your host, Liam Carballal, and joining me again is Richard Acritelli. Richard, always
Liam, good to see you.
Good. So, Richard, last time we had you here, we were talking about a more contemporary issue, Iran. I think we should stay on that track, and let's talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine and how that's progressed a little bit. So, just for a little background for our audience, Ukraine, many of the issues stem from Soviet times. During the Russian Civil War, Ukraine was split mostly between the whites, who were anti-communist, more conservative, and the anarchists, who were very left-wing. As they were fighting, the Soviet Union was able to invade, take control of Ukraine. Stalin then began a program to try and break Ukrainian nationalism. He first started with the deliberate starvation campaign, the Holodomor. Are you familiar?
Sure.
Yeah. He also drew the borders in such a way of modern Ukraine that include large Russian-speaking populations, which, divide and conquer, the timeless old military tactic. World War II came around. Millions of Ukrainians died under Nazi occupation. Closest thing to a bright spot was in the 1960s, Nikita Khrushchev returned Crimea to Ukraine. It had traditionally been ruled by the Russians, but Ukraine. He had an interest. What's the story with Nikita Khrushchev? He wasn't Ukrainian, was he?
He wasn't Ukrainian. He lived on the border. He was Russian.
Yeah.
I always kind of thought he was Ukrainian.
Yeah, I thought that too.
He kind of ran the partisans during World War II in Ukraine itself. Khrushchev became very more moderate than Stalin when he took over in 1953. The thing was with the Crimea was that the Soviets never realized that in about 40 years down the road that their country would dissolve. No one really did. If you lived in the 70s, 80s, I was a young guy in the 1980s, you never thought you'd see that fall of the Berlin Wall. You never thought you'd see the fall of the Soviet Union, because it was always us against them. Today, I'm still shocked that Cuba is communist. I think in both of our lifetimes that we're going to see that Cuba is going to fall. With the Ukrainians, it's a very strange relationship with the Russians or the Soviets, because they'd rather be governed by their own people. They'd rather be free of communist control. Putin called the Ukrainians a bunch of Nazis. Yeah. Meanwhile, Zelensky, I believe, is Jewish, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense, Putin's comment. But the relations between the Ukrainians and the Russians, it's really a glass, half empty. You look at the famine in the 1930s.
Holodomor.
Oh, it's terrible. They're bleeding the people. You're not going to see too many Irish speaking fondly of the British after the potato famine.
No.
When it's believed that the food was there and they purposely did not give it to them. It's the same thing with the Russians. You're this large minority group that really doesn't want you there leading them. And then you end up killing off many of them. Those that survive might get sent to gulags. They kind of get broken into communism. The war starts. The Germans go in there. They're saying, well, we're going to liberate you from Soviet, rule and the tyranny and Stalin and everything else. And then the Germans end up becoming just as bad as Soviets, if not worse. So the Ukrainians have always been almost at the crossroads between, it's Eastern Europe, but it's the crossroads between, the Soviets and the Russians heading towards Europe. And they have never really been firmly in love with, that leadership agreement. Do they want to be friends? I guess. that friendship's a long ways away after this brutal war. But, what you're looking at is that Khrushchev basically did this on his own. Mm-hmm. He's going to give the Crimea, which is a strategic area on the Black Sea, to the Ukrainians. It's like a friendship agreement after 300 years of them kind of being in the Russian orbit. Mm-hmm. And I mean, who would have ever known that the Cold War would have come to an end the way it did? Mm-hmm. These former republics would have gained their independence. Yeah. And you look at today, the Ukrainians are extremely tough people. They're outgunned. They're outnumbered.
It's one of the poorest countries in Europe.
Yeah, but it's also one of the largest. Mm-hmm. I think it's the second largest behind Germany. Mm-hmm. So the relationship has always had strains. Mm-hmm. And when you saw Putin speaking with the Chinese, who's a Xi, at the Olympics, they looked like two kids that were about to rob like a candy store with these mischievous looks on their face. Mm-hmm. And that's the look that Putin gives you. Yeah. He gives you that, I don't know, like that devious look on his face. He is one of the smarter men in the room, but that might have caught up with him. Yeah. Because the Ukrainians basically begged him, don't attack us. We'll negotiate with you. We'll speak with you. Mm-hmm. But if you come into this country, you're going to leave in a coffin. Yep. And you have 30,000 Russians dying a month.
That we know that we million.
Yeah, that we know of. We know of. And it's still that Russian, Soviet, closed-minded, belief that we're only going to let out so much information. Yeah. So in a couple of years, when more books are written about this, and you have, people from the Russian government are no longer there, and they're writing their memoirs, and they're the ones working in there, like the Department of Defense. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that are actually signing the orders and pushing these soldiers forward and the resources and so on. I think we're going to be surprised at how bad it was over there. The gravity of the situation is not good for Putin. He is in a quagmire.
He just lost his ally in Syria because they had to pull Russian troops off their front.
And the big thing with that in Syria was that the Russians and the Soviets before them always wanted warm water ports. Yeah. So you think about the longitude, latitude, the furthest south that the Russians' territory goes today is the longitude, latitude of Maine. Yeah. So they always want a warm water port. And we end up going into Syria and making deals with some guys that aren't exactly the friendliest. Mm-hmm. And they have some ties to terrorism and this and that and so on. But we don't want the Russians going back in there with that vacuum. Mm. We're hoping that they're somewhat reformed. Yep. So that base itself, when Trump was in the first time, they used the chemical weapons. Yeah. And Trump did say that there is a red line. Mm-hmm. If you use this stuff, we'll respond. We responded. We told the Russians what we were going to do, and there was the satellite pictures of those Russian naval ships, like just beating it into the Mediterranean, just taking off, because they knew that once we commit, like the Israelis, that's it. We're not going back on it once we commit. So we will use force and show our presence.
There's one line I had heard is I was literally taking a Russian culture class back in 2014 when they invaded Crimea. And the one line that always stuck with me when I was taking this class is Putin once said that the fall of the Soviet Union is the biggest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century.
Yeah, well, he was an intelligence officer. Yeah. He saw some of it in Berlin. Mm-hmm. So it always stuck to like his heart, like a personal failure. Yeah. Now that you have the West moving further and further into Eastern Europe.
He was the former head of the KGB, correct?
I don't believe he was the head of the KGB. Oh. He was always a government administrator. Mm-hmm. I believe that he might have been, and I could be wrong on this, he might have been the head of some of the intelligence in East Germany. Stasi. Kind of like working with the Stasi and stuff like that. Yep. But they always called him a very good government administrator. He knew who everybody was.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with Stalin. Stalin was the one in the background with the card catalogs, you know, and it was either him or Trotsky, and then it, you know, became Stalin. But, you know, when you look at Putin, it was like to this day, it's like a sheer embarrassment for him. But he's got, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars or even billions of dollars in the bank from the capitalism that was brought to Russia. So there's the irony. Yeah, it is the irony of it. You know, it's, I don't know if he knows which way he wants to move, you know, in terms of being an authoritative democracy or, you know, going back to whatever the Soviet glory days were.
Yeah. I'm just blown away that the ruler of a country that lost 15 million people in World War II would say that the fall of the Soviet Union is the biggest geopolitical disaster. I think his parents survived the siege of Leningrad, where like 1 million people starved to death, and that's what he chooses.
Well, the Soviets couldn't provide basic needs for their people. Bread, food, milk, eggs, steak, you know, meat, poultry, right? So when you can't do that, you're not going to survive. And in the 1980s, Reagan said, I'm going to kick in the structure of communism. There's no way a country you can't provide these basic needs is going to compete with the United States. You know, if they're going to build 1 aircraft carrier, we'll build 3. They're going to build, you know, 100 tanks, we'll build 1,000. You know, that sort of thing. So it just puts on a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, Putin's got a tremendous pressure today because he's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't. He's stuck in the mud now when it comes to the Ukraine. Because let's say in 50 days with Trump, with this new red line, right? With this new
tariff.
With this, you know, we're going to pummel you with tariffs. Things are only going to get harder for you. Now, I did not like Trump's reaction to the Ukraine with the meeting with him, his vice president, and Zelensky early on when they're arguing. I just look bad. If you want to argue, you do that behind closed doors, right? But I think Trump tried to say, I'm going to try to get peace. I'm going to put pressure on both of these men, Zelensky and Putin. I feel as though I could have a relationship with Putin where most leaders are saying, you know, you most likely can. I think Putin has done some very foolish things where it's boomeranged on him. Trump now, with the America First, has kind of said, all right, we're not going to give all this money. We've given almost a quarter, of the amount of money that's gone to funding the war. We're not going to do as much of that anymore, but now we'll sell you weapons. All right, and now the Europeans are going to buy more weapons from us and transfer them to the Ukrainians. You look at Finland and Sweden, 2 countries, especially the Finns, who fight that border war in 1939, the Winter War. And, you know, what's one of the reasons why they had to make peace? Because they're so drastically smaller. But they weren't scared of the Soviets. And Harry S. Truman goes, this business is actually good for us, that the Soviets are, you know, and then he later says that about the Nazis and the Soviets fighting each other is actually good for us. And then the Swedes.
Fascists and communists kill each other instead of having us do it.
And then the Swedes too. And then Trump, who NATO's not always in love with, has basically said, you have to spend more. So the increases have now gone up to 5%. And I think the Europeans, you know, they've realized that this is a very, very serious situation. If you look at the polls the other night, so many drones were called in to fly into the Ukraine and to bomb and attack that the Poles put their military on security. Because you got these countries, it's scary, but you got these countries that are very close to all this fighting. You have Americans going into Poland with all kinds of resources, bringing stuff towards the Ukrainian border, And I don't know, you're very close to this situation getting worse. It's like the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? You know, we're in such close contact with the Soviets that if something had gone terribly wrong, it could have escalated a lot further. And it's that case now. You have so many men in armaments that are so close to each other, and you have this new form of warfare with the drones. And part of the deal is that we're going to start selling more of our equipment, right? American military equipment is the best in the world. Part of the, I guess, the positive, if you want to call it that, is we're seeing what American equipment is working during this war. Because you got to remember, we're so far removed now from Iraq and Afghanistan. All right? So, and the other thing is that the Ukrainians, like the Iranians itself, they've created that whole new drone technology. Even though we have it, and I'm sure ours are very tough, we're not using them like those countries are. The Iranians are using them within Ukraine for the Russians. Ukrainians have opened up their whole new service with this, and they're sharing their technology with us, which is very smart on our part. Okay, we have to get our scientists and our military guys and our government wrapped around a new form of warfare that's being conducted. Even though we bombed the heck out of Iran with the nuclear weapon sites and stuff like that, okay, the drones itself is that's like a scarier version. It's like you think about with Germany with the V1 and the V2 rockets. You don't know when they're going to come in, and they're sending waves of these in. It's scary. It really is. It's a new form of warfare that we're seeing unfold.
It should be noted, when we're talking about these drones, we're not talking about the little tiny commercial ones you can buy at like
at Target.
At Target, I've seen pictures of them online. They're taller than a man. So imagine thousands of these being sent by the Russian military,
and they're only going to get better. Because they realize after a while what the faults are, and sometimes you have to go a couple steps back to go a couple steps forward. Okay, so what you're looking at is that the technology is going to get better. Okay, and this is a scary thing. This is not like talking about our iPhone. Okay, on Black Friday after Thanksgiving, where a new iPhone comes out and has all these different capabilities. These drones are attacking cities and towns and military hospitals and schools and stuff like that. Putin, if he survives this and peace is made, he probably will not be able to travel out of his own country to the bulk of the nations around the world, because this is only getting worse.
Pariah state like North Korea.
I think that's the direction that they're heading in. And I think in 10 or 15 years, when the Russians go to try to do something like this again, you're going to have a whole generation of people that said, listen, I had a cousin, I had a brother, I had a sister that were killed in this war. Do we really want to go down this road again? Because Putin is 73 years old. He's not getting any younger. And there's some rumors that he has a sickness and so on. So I don't know. I'm surprised that elements of his own military or security forces have not taken him out already, because the casualties have run so deep.
And they're losing their spot on the international community. The reason I mentioned the Syria thing is Russia was Syria's ally, and now the Assad regime is gone, and they've lost that alliance.
So is Iran too. Right?
So it seems like they're sacrificing everything for Ukraine. Is it worth it?
Well, that's the thing. It's not. I think when you look at NATO with like Finland and Sweden, those countries came in. I think the Hungarians had some pushback against the Swedes. Or no, excuse me. The Turks had some pushback, right, against the Swedes. But I think Ukraine in our lifetime is going to be a member of NATO.
I can see
because they're never going to forget or forgive this here. They could shake hands all they want at some point, but in the back of their minds, they're never going to forget that 20% of their country was overrun. Areas of their infrastructure have been destroyed. At the outset of the war, or on the onset of the war itself, they were targeting Chernobyl and places like that. Nuclear reactors. They have a bunch of nuclear reactors over there. Okay, and the Russians have shown a complete, irresponsibility in waging war here. It's kind of like the Soviet soldiers being given orders and taking Berlin in terms of where they had to compete with each other of who would get to where in Berlin fast enough. At some points, they were almost firing at each other.
Yeah.
So the Soviets have always had that pool of soldiers and everything, but they're using criminals from the jails. They have penal colonies that are fighting.
Yeah. Penal
and then
battalions.
they end up alienating their own soldiers because they said, well, if they fight for so long, then they could leave. Now it's, all right, if you survive this, we'll reduce,
They're bringing in North Koreans.
yeah, you're bringing in North Koreans, which is interesting for us because you better believe some of those prisoners and some of their things that they're carrying are being dissected by us. The Central Intelligence Agency is certainly there. It's like with the drones, right? You better believe some of those Iranian drones had found their way into the hands of the Israelis, who already has that information, I'm sure, on them. So the North Koreans, it's an interesting thing. You're sending them thousands and thousands of miles with a limited form of training to fight in this war in Europe. And that's really, I know they've gone to some, smaller engagements around the world and this and that, but this is, the meat grinder. This really is. And if you're a Russian soldier and you're being sent to the Ukraine, now you know how the German soldier felt on the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
Once the Russians got their feet under them during the war.
Yeah.
Now it's reversed.
Historical analogies go, is trench fighting, Russian casualties are amounting to 1 million. They've been fighting in stalemate for 3 years now. Do you think it's possible we see something like we saw in 1917 where people start storming the palace, lock Putin up?
Well, they said one of the reasons why he doesn't want to make peace is because as a dictator, if he makes peace and then the smoke clears and they say, all right, this is all we got, okay, and we're going to take over Ukrainian territory that's been completely destroyed, for all the losses that we've had, it's not going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And he could probably feel the cold air in the back of his neck. So you asking if there could be a military, a social, a political, an economic upheaval against him? Definitely. Definitely. Because you already have people that are in the shadows that want him out. So he has to gain a significant amount of territory. I would think that's what this is about, is having a buffer between him, Ukrainians, and the West, and so on. But for them to say completely that NATO will never allow the Ukraine to come in, maybe, I don't know, right now, just to entice Putin to stop the fighting, but it's going to probably occur down the road that Kyiv is going to sign a deal where they're going to be another NATO country.
Yeah. And
And that's so far into the interior, okay, of almost Russian territory. Putin's not in a good way here. He really, he kind of stuck his head into the hornet's nest that he created.
this has been History Repeats. Stay tuned for part 2, where we continue the discussion on the war in Ukraine.